What if you could be in integrity and honesty when it comes to designing your legacy? I have the pleasure to introduce you to Beate Chelette this lovely Friday on the Designing Your Legacy podcast. Welcome, Beate.
Thank you, Angelina, for having me. I'm looking forward to talking legacy.
Yes, yes. It is a joy to bring you on to this podcast today because you've been on quite a journey, but I will let you explain the journey from building your business to facing betrayal to selling your company to one of Bill Gates' entities. So please share.
Yes, so my name is Beate Chelette. I'm known as a growth architect. Today, I work with visionaries, thought leaders, people that have big ideas, and I help them land planes, meaning I help them to build their authority and scale their impact. And I do that in one of the three ways. We either help people that have an idea and want to turn their talent into a business, or they have the business, but they don't have a system or something that sets them apart from everybody else, and we build their signature growth system. Or when they have all two of these, then we help them to come up with the optimal alignment growth plan, meaning we help them to actually scale the business and make themselves obsolete, oftentimes to also leave a legacy behind. And my journey is the journey of a um, unruly child that really didn't fit in or didn't think I was fitting in. And I'm originally from Germany, so you probably still hear the accent. It was about the rules and regulation of Germany, which are all true, that things are done in a particular way, that you follow the path, and then if you do right by the path, then you somehow seem to get rewarded. And none of this applied to me. I was not the smartest kid, so I was told by my mother. And I went into the Germany has three school systems. I was not in the highest, but in the medium school system,
They're very
and went,
strict.
oh, very strict, very strict.
Yeah.
There's, yeah, no room for,
Creativity. Yeah. Thinking outside the
mm,
box.
no, not outside the box. And when I really figured this out, Angelina, it was when we go in this aptitude test and we talk about, well, what do you want to do after school? Because I couldn't go to college and study because that, wasn't in the smart part of the school. And she asked me all these questions, and it's like this questionnaire: Do you like being outside? Do you mind carrying weights? Are you physically fit? Are you afraid of heights? And I'm like, crossing and marking. And after 16 pages, the answer was that I should be a roofer.
Interesting, given that you sold your company to become financially independent and how far you've come. So So if I go back in time for a moment, and thank you for speaking into those early roots, because I think oftentimes young adults, children, teenagers can be discouraged by a system that does not recognize their talents. I think even Albert Einstein has a quote that says something along the lines of that if you judge a fish by its ability to ride a bicycle, you miss out.
I like that a lot. It truly is. And then, with this aptitude test, she looked at me and she said, "Well, I'm pretty sure you don't want to be a roofer." And I said, "I don't see any reason why I would." And she goes, "Well, what do you want to be?" I said, "I want to be a textile designer." We were talking
Yeah.
about creative. And she says,
Yeah.
"No, there's too many applicants, not enough jobs." I said, "Well, what about a jewelry designer?" And she says, "Too
Mm.
many applicants, not enough jobs." She says, "What else?" I said, "A photographer." And she says, "Too many applicants, not enough jobs. Don't you want to be a secretary?"
Well, come to America, Beate.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I became a photographer anyway, and started my work at I realized very quickly I was really good at the business side with the creative aspect. Was a photo editor at Elle magazine, and then I immigrated to the United States, became a photographer representative, a producer for still photography, did work for Wrangler, Levi Strauss, Mercedes Benz, big, wonderful, wonderful client. Struggled my way along, and then finally, I'm a $1 million business, and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah. Well, I think you definitely had an eye for something and then it got refined over time. And then the idea came about, I think, regarding licensing and royalties. And that's kind of how the business received the momentum. And before we dive into the legacy bit for, the next portion of our conversation today, I just thought it was so interesting that in your journey of success, you really got tested. And I wondered if you would speak for a moment into when your assistant betrayed you. because I think a lot of the times people don't see that one coming. And yet sometimes the five closest people that surround us can surprise us.
Oh, you said this very, very delicately and politely. Yeah, so it was before Christmas, and something was going on with my assistant, my only employee. And I fired her eventually because she just was acting so strange. And it turned out that she had come up with a business idea how to run a business with my key vendor, another person that I had under contract. And basically, it was my business without me. And next thing I know, I'm calling clients to call in on outstanding invoices. And they said, we already paid them because they told us you are not paying them, you're withholding money. And so I I sued both of them because I've been betrayed and I've been lied to, and I still believed that the justice system was about being right at that time.
Yeah, well, it's a season and a tunnel of waking up oftentimes and picking our battles and knowing that sometimes when we lose, there's a, what is that expression? We can lose the battle, but we can win the war. And you won the war. Yeah.
I did win the war with a lot of bruises and cuts to really show it. And as I'm fighting this huge battle in this lawsuit, and I know we talk about legacy, and legacy really goes into this because, as you very well said, you learn that not every battle is worth fighting, not every fight is worth your energy, and that you have to stay focused on is sort of the positive part on the outcome, not on the, what's happening to you, because stuff happens to really all of us. But as I'm fighting this battle, and I, still have a $500,000 of production value on the books because it's now September and production season starts. It's too cold in Europe, people coming from all over the world to produce here. And September 11th comes and in one day wipes out my production business. Like literally in one day, that whole business was done, over.
And you bounced
You know,
back. You did. Yeah. Yeah. But
yeah,
it's still
eventually.
shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I never bounced back from these two things. I never bounced back from the photographer representation or the production. These businesses were irrevocably gone. But it did give me the idea to the stock photography licensing business for sure.
Yes. Yes. And I think that you definitely have an eye for design and aesthetics because there was a great idea matched with talent. And so
Yeah. Yes,
I,
yes. And again with the piece about what what is the legacy you want to leave behind or what's the legacy you want to build. And I had recognized one thing, that there was something in the market that had a timelessness. And I was in the architectural and interior design world, and I realized that a modern home is a modern home, and a Victorian house is a Victorian house, will always be a Victorian house. It doesn't change. There might be a new design idea. So I figured that the longevity, the legacy of these images was much higher than a celebrity photograph. And that's why I picked this particular business, because it would make money while I wasn't there. So if Home Depot, doing their new paint brochure, looking for a Victorian style house with a red door, they would find a Victorian style house with a red door. And it would always be a Victorian style house with a red door in perpetuity. And so that's how I built this business.
yes. So one of the things that I find so interesting is that you're in a place right now where you're financially independent. You sold your business and you now have choice. And I think, for instance, the author of Harry Potter, I'm trying to think of her name right now. Um,
Rowling, J.K.
yes,
Rowling.
J.K. Rowling. She was asked about that moment when she had more choice regarding wealth, affluence. And she said, it's the ability to pick three pairs of shoes and not just have to pick one. So you're at a place now where you've got some choice. So it's interesting because here's my first question for you. What, how do you see this word legacy now that you have choice and you're not, backed into a corner where you have to hustle and survive?
Legacy has actually multiple variants for me. So number one, my daughter, who's now 31, has had a baby. And so now I'm a grandparent and she's 5 months old. So I think about legacy from a different perspective as to what is everything that I've done worth to someone else? Because when I die, there'll be a tombstone, if there'll be a tombstone, and there says here lies a whatever mom, wife, friend. I don't even think it'll say on my tombstone, here lies a business owner or a consultant, because that's not typically what is said on tombstones. So when I go, what I have done leaves to a large extent with me. So the only thing that is in legacy is the methods and the systems that I created, and I am a strategist, so systems, methods, and processes is everything for me. And so my legacy is helping business owners to create these processes and systems so that my legacy, my impact legacy, lives through what they do in perpetuity. And as they hand it over and bring it forward to the next generation, or however they want to do that, that's how my legacy lives on. So that part's really important, that the shortcuts and the hard lessons I learned, Angelina, is that gets passed on, and somebody's got to do something with it because it was really hard to get here. The second part about legacy is, what do I want my personal legacy as a mother, as a grandmother, and as a wife, and as a sister, and as a daughter to be. And now that gets a little bit more convoluted because it's been about business all this time. But then when you have the choice, you go, but who am I in all of this? Am I going to continue to hustle, 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 hustle? What's my spirituality? What is my legacy impact that I want to impart now on the wisdoms that I have learned on my journey? Not just the business side, but my personal learnings of integrity, honesty, of, even though this word's so overused, authenticity, of speaking the truth at all times, and having a sincere desire to help other people succeed. So how does that legacy look like? And we shared when we were in the green room that I just got back from an ayahuasca journey, and I did this ayahuasca journey because I really felt that there was a part of me that needed healing, and a part of me that needed to emerge to get clear on what this part of my personal and emotional and spiritual legacy is going to be.
Absolutely. It's the question of, who are you outside of your work identity?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Fascinating. And I think that is the real journey. I think a lot of times people associate their identity and their legacy with their work because we live in a culture where that is measured and that is celebrated. And yet the more meaningful stuff that gets passed on, that is what I call the glue or the Velcro of the universe, is who we are as a person regarding that spiritual capital, the human capital, the intellectual capital, more than, what we do for our work. And I know a lot of times that's a hard distinction to make because, again, we live in this culture that people are so tied to their work identity that they may not make that time to develop who they are outside of their work. So
it's easier. It's much easier. Going to work is much easier than dealing with all this personal stuff and your
development.
Oh my God. And the crap your mom said, and the way dad acts, and the abandonment, and the pain, and and people's behavior, and the backstab. I mean, it's much easier to go to work and slay the dragon every day and feel like you've done something. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Although it is interesting that I think that because you've gone on that ayahuasca journey now, I think it's an invitation to show up differently.
Oh, sure. Oh, and obviously it's been only a couple of days since I got back, so I guess I'm still technically on the psychedelics. But what shifts at this point in my life is that there comes a point where you just cannot push as hard as you have pushed before, because it's physically not possible, because the overworking or the burnout isn't a burnout of a year, this is a burnout of a decade.
Sure, the toll it takes.
The toll it takes. And there comes a point where you recognize that I'm doing this to myself with my relentless self-judgment and my lack of self-compassion and my driving myself and more, and you don't give to yourself. And then I had this beautiful vision when I was in one of the journeys, that if you don't nurture your heart stops beating and then everything's over.
You become
So the nurture
hardened.
of the, yeah, you become hardened. So the nurture of the heart is the key to everything, because that is the pulse. That's what matters most. If the heart is nice and red and is beating properly, then you don't need to worry about anything, because then you are alive and you're well. But if the heart can't beat, and my brother had an almost fatal heart attack literally over my birthday just a couple months ago, and and at that time I already had committed to this journey, and I was surprised on how many different things were happening all at the same time on so many different levels. But you do look at this differently, and you say, what's a legacy that I want to leave behind? And is it a legacy of, here was a woman that worked nonstop? And the answer is no. That's a terrible legacy.
Well, it's a legacy for a lot of people. Pardon my cell phone in the background. We're just going to ignore it for a moment. Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about coming from a place of scarcity, of putting oneself on that mouse wheel. I got to run, 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 compared to that flow, and being willing to connect with that. So I mentioned in our preamble that there's a number of listeners and viewers that are under age 40. And so my next question to you is, do you think as a child you would have had the opportunity to have personal agency around the design of your legacy?
You don't know that you do, because you are at that point not aware of the choices that you make at that point and the impact of that on your life. But you do. So these years around 30 to 40, specifically the formative years where you establish who you are the groundwork of your legacy, like it or not. And if you are unaware that it is, that might be a pretty bumpy road. It's going to be a bumpy road regardless, because that's just what happens when you try to figure out which way works for you. But if you have an inclination that you are building that legacy, you're going to be a lot more deliberate about it. And I have found, and it's sort of an interesting thing to think about, that there are people that are able to take certain shortcuts that's sometimes a little bit iffy, and you go, man, the guy just lies and cheats and look, at everything that they're creating for themselves, and they're swimming in money. I mean, just look at internet marketing. And it leaves you with a little bit of envy and a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. And you go like, well, if only I could be so ruthless to just lie outright or believe this, then, maybe my life would be so much better. But I believe that if we are in the spirit of integrity and honesty, which is exactly what we're talking about, you have to believe that this is the path that you're designed to walk. And the comparison of the journey to another journey never works, because the circumstances are different. So you have to own your own journey, because you are a different person, and because what matters to you doesn't necessarily matter to anybody else. And again, I go back to this ayahuasca journey that I just did. There was 83 people, and we all going through this. We all drinking the same medicine. There was not one person that had the same experience, but we all at the same time in the same room drinking the same medicine, listening to the same music by the same shamans, and we all have a different experience. So we have to own our own experience and believe that our own legacy is really designed for only us and nobody else. And if we can detach ourselves from the external pressure or the external expectation, or even our own expectation, how that looks like, the journey is going to be so much richer.
Yes, yes. So, what would you like to be in your holistic legacy? Like, let's say hypothetically, there's a hardcover coffee table book that you'll pass on to your daughter and your grandbaby that's coming into this world. What values or guiding principles, like what would be in that?
Yeah, the first thing that it would say, here's a woman that had a huge impact on women leadership in the world by example and by her teachings. Here is somebody who freely and generously shared what she knows with others. And here's somebody who was truly seen by other people for who she was: generous, caring, loving, with a little bit of a temper, and, and genuinely interested in seeing other people succeed. So, my legacy that I want to impart is that people look at me as a woman role model, that they can understand on what I've been through in my life and what I had to overcome to get here, the impossibility of the odds that I beat. And with the trauma I went through, which I have not talked about because my mother is still alive, but I will when she's not here anymore, that I still managed to become a pretty good person. And to look at that and you say, that's something that I can aspire to be. And that's what I want to be, is I want to be a light for others to say, if she can do this, I can.
Yeah, yeah. I know that on prior podcasts you've gone in depth regarding the journey that you've been on, whether it was, being at a point financially in life where the rent was due and the lease payment for the commercial space. And then I think you had to fly back to Germany and you're losing your house. And then your dad passes away. Like it was a series of dominoes that really tested your mettle. But let me go back to this question for a moment. What would you say would be, let's say, your top 3 to 4 values? I'm hearing determination. What else?
Resilience,
Okay.
non-attachment to failure.
Okay. Ooh, that's good.
And the third one would be love.
Okay. Which is the highest
Love.
vibration.
Yeah, love fully and without hesitation.
Yes. So being that you're an immigrant to America, what do you think your ancestors in Germany and so forth would say regarding what it is you've been able not just to accomplish, but who you've been able to grow into?
Well, on my back again, my ayahuasca journey, they were all there and we were dancing together. So they seemed to be genuinely happy. I think that they'll be, I know they're proud of me and I know that they are excited to, to have been part of this journey of the healing journey of this trauma. I mean, also remember that where I come from is I come from Germany. My grandfather was in World War One and was wounded when he was 17 and left on the field. My other grandfather was an officer, a Nazi officer in World War II that got killed by a bomb in the Oslo harbor. So the ancestry of, the war and the destruction in my family is real. My mother had to grow up without a father. My father had to be locked away by his mother for his father who was left on the field with 2 gunshot wounds amongst dead people. In his PTSD dream state, wouldn't run with a gun and shoot his own children. The mother had to lock him away. So can you imagine on the amount of healing that takes place as I heal and as I look into, these values that we just talked about and what matters, and stopping the trauma here, not projecting my trauma of things I didn't get to my child, who then would, forward this to her own child. If I stop that here and I release my daughter from the burden to give me something that I didn't get, and I can give what I didn't give to myself, and I release what I didn't get back to my ancestors and my parents, that's, I think, the power of where we are at right now, in a very conscious power.
Yes, very much so. I almost metaphorically have this image of it's like your ancestors were being almost in a sense pushed around by the historical moments
Mhm,
of that time, and here you are, and you're pushing back.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah, and I know with there's something called the Akka chords, Akashic records, that as you heal, you get to take them with you in the timelines and the stacks of time. So
7
it's
generations, mhm.
correct. Yeah. So how again, courageous of you to do this work because there are ripple effects that are sent energetically, even though we can't see them with our visible eye in this light spectrum.
That is actually I like the way you put that, that's absolutely correct, and I believe that and you do this in your podcast, the power of just reminding the listener to say, it sometimes feels like you're really alone because you're here, you're fighting this like lonely battle, and you go, is it even worth it sometimes? But if you think about that, you are in this string of pearls that is all connected, and as you change one thing here, it changes everywhere else. It just makes these micro adjustments everywhere else. Now you're visual. Now you're having a much bigger purpose. And so for everybody who does the work, you're healing generations and generations and generations. And you release a lot of these negative and bad emotions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One might say that you're creating your family's legacy in the broader context.
I sure hope so.
Yeah. Well,
I sure hope so.
it's not easy to bend emotional steel, but I think you're taking
Vent emotions, yeah.
the right
Yeah, you
steps.
know what? I reached out to my daughter while I was going through this journey, and there was a moment where I where I realized that there was no way that I hadn't been broken by what happened. And I said to her, and this is all via text, and I said to her, "Look, I release you today, fully and completely. You do not have to be like me. You don't have to aspire to be like me. You don't have to be successful like me. Just do you, and I'll support you. Just be you."
That's beautiful. What did she say back out of curiosity?
She went like, "Mom?" Question mark.
Which is the greatest gift that you can give to her. Yeah.
She's she goes like, "Mom, are you okay? Are you okay?"
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for being so vulnerable to share that. So if you had 1 year left, and as legacy is more about living than dying, in my perspective, what would you do or want to do with the non-renewable resource of your time?
I probably would, spend a part of my time to write down and to deliver the things that are in my core value, the things that I feel like I need to still say, and then put that out there. And the other part, I would love my family, my husband, and my daughter and my grandchild, and go travel and travel and travel and travel
And play. Yeah.
and play. Yeah.
And connect.
Maybe do
Yeah.
another ayahuasca trip just in case.
Well, there is something about the spiritual journey of us being
Mhm.
here. I know oftentimes we hear that expression that we're a soul having a human experience or a human having something like that. Yeah. What message would you want to give others who are in survival mode today, whether it's because of inflation or just they're coming up and they're a millennial and they're not quite, they haven't quite bought into this university idea because there's college debt and they're questioning. What message would you have for a young adult today who is in survival mode?
Non-attachment to failure. There's an example. I tell it in this story, Angelina. And the story is like this: when you go to your car and the car says you need to update your GPS, but you ignore it because you have to go to the gym, you have to go to see your friend, your parents, work, whatever. So, yeah, don't update your GPS. And then inevitably one day you want to take the road you always take, and now they're building the on ramp for the freeway. It's closed and it'll be closed forever. So now you're going to get out of the car, you're going to throw yourself on the pavement. You throw a temper tantrum. You say things like, "I'm the worst driver in the world. I can't believe I'm such an idiot. Driving sucks. I'm going to give my car back. Cars suck. Insurance companies are all the devil. I can't believe I'm so stupid." It says nobody ever. You just go, ugh. You smack yourself on the forehead. You said, "It even told me to update the GPS." So you simply wave at the gentleman or the lady in the hard hat and the chic, neon suit with the reflective stripe on it, and you find another way. Why? Because you know that the destination that you wanted to go to is still there.
Mm, mm, yeah,
But
that's
what
deep.
we do when we make a mistake, we go like, "Oh my God, I'm the worst driver in the world. The destination probably vanished in the meantime. My goals are all gone. What do I do?" None of this is a reality. It's just, this is not the way. So just say thank you in gratitude for showing me that this is not the way to go, and find another way. And if you can wave and smile, even better.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The human mind will go to that what's wrong conversation before it goes to that what's wanting to happen conversation.
Truly.
Yeah. What is your next vision and what it is you would like to create? Is it the growth architect strategy business that you're
Yeah,
growing?
what's shifted for me, Angelina, is that over the course of the last 6 months, I realized that on the high ticket level, that things are definitely slowing down. And I think that that has to do with a lot of the internet marketing strategies, with the oversaturation of the market, with all kinds of different things. And I went back to, what do I really want to do? And I'm really good in helping people land planes. I'm just good at it. And I can see it, I can hear it. So I want to help more and more and more people to turn their talent into a business. I went back to this program that I've done that's had over 22,000 people in it. And I updated it, and we are in the process of actually relaunching it. And it's a very reasonably priced program for the reason that I feel that a lot of people are ready to take their own destiny in their own hands. And they learned that corporations do not have your best interest in mind. They use you as long as they can use you and extract you, and then they discard you. But they'll make it sound like you're valuable until they don't need you anymore, and then you're just not. So I want to give people the opportunity to turn their talent into a business and figure out how can they make a contribution in their own terms and take care of their own destiny. And the other thing that we did is I created a quiz, and that was one of those things that, we really channeled this pretty quickly, where I created a formula where people can calculate what their talent is worth. It's that actual mathematical formula that I came up with. So all you do is you go to what's your talent worth? You answer the questions, and it'll give you an actual number of what your talent is worth, your earning potential in this market. And then you decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah, interesting. You're welcome to send any of those links. I'll be happy to put them in the show notes.
We'll do that. Yeah.
It's interesting when you talk about companies, a number of multinational corporations are actually run by narcissists. And sometimes what happens in those big
Yeah.
corporations is they have the narcissists at the top surrounded by enablers. And whether we talk about a company like Blockbuster, and again, I don't know if this is accurate for Blockbuster, it's just a metaphor. What can oftentimes happen is the enablers are are encouraging the narcissist, nobody's telling the truth, and the whole corporation falls down. And all of the people that are working for it don't have as much influence and say, and they don't know, kind of just like, well, what happened? We thought that we believed in the leadership, but they're not close enough to realize the dynamics at the top of many multinational corporations, whether it's Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, the titans of Wall Street, et cetera. And I just think it's such an interesting dynamic that now people are looking into how do they become an entrepreneur? How do they grow those skill sets? Because again, public and private school oftentimes teach a person how to be a great employee, but it's a whole other capacity to be a business owner, to be a founder, and to take that journey. So I just wanted to echo back of what you had just shared. Okay, so how do you get to live into your values today?
Well, that's why I did the journey, to get really clear about what these values are. I didn't do any goals. I didn't do any envisioning, because I felt I first needed to figure out what this journey would unfold. But my values are definitely more so now self-care, relationship, love, family, because I realized how much I neglected that, because it scared me because of my past history, because it wasn't safe.
Mm,
So work was safe because I had control over work, but I never had control over my family. And now that I let that go, I feel I can make that more valuable. So I definitely would recommend your listeners, Angelina, if they hear this and if this resonates, get through the trauma. Figure out how to get through this trauma, because you're gonna carry that shit, forgive my word, on forever until you let it go. You have to
abs-
go through it to let it go. And that gives you the freedom. And it's not that, in the trauma resolve, my big fear was, do I have to go through all of this all over again? Yes. But you don't have the same pain because you're not a child. You're not the child that this happened. You're the adult watching what was done to the child, and you can do the child healing at the same time.
The
But
reframe.
the reframing. And I think the freedom at this point in our lives really comes from our ability to say, I know what happened, but it's a story now. And now I reframe that story to how I want that story to be told. And is it a victim story, or is it a survivor story, or is it just a story? And am I going to look at this that I became everything I am despite of it, or because of it? And is there a difference? So you become very clear and articulate on how you want to say that. And I think this is the legacy part you also talk about, is like the deliberate action of the legacy. It's, you don't slip into the legacy. You know, the family business was handed down from a narcissist to another narcissist to another narcissist, and everybody adapted the same kind of behavior. That's not legacy. That's accidental legacy at its best. But the real legacy is a deliberate action to say, who am I? How do I show up? How do I show up for other people? How do I want other people to see me? If my perception of myself is different from the perception other people see me, their perception of me supersedes mine of myself. And then you have to become that person that you want to be until that perception is spot on. And that is hard work. And then you can create a legacy based on that, because then you know the formula how to turn yourself in just about anything that you truly desire. And you get clear on that.
Yeah, that's personal agency at its finest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else as we draw to a close this lovely afternoon?
Uh, coming from where I stand at almost 60 and looking back at the trajectory of my life, I think the most important things are that you have to have courage and you can't back down. And your fears are good and you have to learn how to work with them, but you can't believe everything you think.
Hmm.
You must be clear about that. Is it the fear of the ego not wanting to make the change that is prohibiting you from doing something, or is it an actual reason? And most of the time, it is that version of you that is so attached to the way it's always been because it's familiar, even though it's terrible, it's familiar. And that's where the beauty really lies. And that takes a lot of courage to go there and say, the pain of where I am is greater than my fear of change, and I am going to change.
Yeah, that's wise and honest and in integrity. Thank you for speaking into that. Because I think
My
that
pleasure. Yeah.
when you look back on your life, it's not just the business successes, it is what have you learned from all these experiences to then be able to again go back and look at things from another perspective, to not just set yourself free, but set anyone that's connected to you via the Akka cords also free. Ancestry, your children, your grandchildren, and anybody who's listening that can be affected by this today, who has the ears to
Yeah.
ear.
And I
Yeah.
think that's the most important thing, is to release anybody from the bondage that you've been in, because this is unnecessary and it's painful. And you don't want to perpetuate that to your children and their children. That's the last thing I want. The last thing I want is that there's residue of what I went through that's going to stick around. This needs to be done. With that,
Yeah.
that ends with me. And that's a commitment I make.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. What's a good website if somebody wanted to learn more about you?
Yeah, just go to my website at beatechelette.com and take a look around. Schedule an uncovery session. If there's anything you want to talk about, you go to uncoverysession.com. Or if you are curious on what your talent is worth, just go to whatsyourtalentworth.com and find out that number, and then realize that the discrepancy between the number and what you're making right now is the reason you were listening to this podcast.
Boom. Mic drop there. Okay. Before I read my closing paragraph, I just want to take a moment to thank you for the level of depth and vulnerability that you brought to today's podcast conversation. It's been a pure joy to be able to hold space and for you to share this. And so thank you for bringing all of you and playing full out.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to impart to all of your listeners, everybody's listening to the show, wherever you pick up the show, please go there and give it a 5-star review, subscribe, and share this episode with one other person who needs to hear what we talked about today. Please leave a comment. And comments are so critical because comments tell the algorithm what Angelina talks about here really matters. And if it matters, it will matter to other people. So if you say it matters to you, she can reach more people.
Lovely. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I coach. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat or moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you for joining us today. And if you're tuning in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., again, please remember to rate and review and share. And thank you so much to Beate for speaking into your legacy.